for your words. We now are going to have Mtu. Okay. And we're going to go in a few minutes on the phone here.
I am Mtu Mweusi. I am a political organizer for the All-African Peoples Revolutionary Party, GC. We would like to thank our indigenous brothers and sisters for inviting us to this commemoration so that way we may express our unity and solidarity with the indigenous peoples and nations of the Western Hemisphere. The All-African Peoples Revolutionary Party, GC, is honored to be at Malcolm X Park and with our listeners at this special period in history, with our people, friends, and allies for this monumentous commemoration of indigenous peoples. African people's solidarity with the indigenous peoples and nations of the Western Hemisphere is one in principle. Kwame Nkrumah addressed this issue as Africa confronted the same problem the indigenous peoples and nations face in the Western Hemisphere with settlers. Settler colonialism is an international and Pan-African problem, the base of U.S.-led imperialism worldwide. Kwame Nkrumah addressed the problem of Africa. He asserted the problem of Africa, looked at as a whole, is a wide and diversified one. But its true solution lies in the application of one principle, namely the right of a people to rule themselves. No compromise can affect this cardinal and fundamental principle, and the idea that when a handful of settlers acquire a living space on our continent, the indigenes must lose this right, and is not only a serious travesty of justice, but is also a woeful contradiction of the very dictates of history. The A-APRP-GC states indisputably, there can be no political integrity or peace in the Western Hemisphere without the objective resolution of the land question and the emancipation of all indigenous peoples and nations. History has recorded that the founding of the United States of America and other countries in the Western Hemisphere were born out of land theft and genocide committed against the indigenous peoples and nations in North, Central, and South America and the Caribbean. European military and armed settlers were primary implements of genocide used by the U.S. and other European governments for the colonization of the Western Hemisphere. The founding fathers, in establishing the United States of America, created a racist and murderous apartheid state. It was the USA that became and is the international imperialist model for the establishment and institutionalization of settler colonial racist apartheid states worldwide. These barbaric crimes against our indigenous brothers and sisters in the Western Hemisphere demand condemnation and protest. More importantly, the All-African Peoples Revolutionary Party, GC, is participating in this commemoration in solidarity and to memorialize and pay homage to the courageous Apache, Arawak, Aymara, Aztec, Caribs, Cherokee, Cheyenne, Chippewa, Choctaw, Cortega, Eskimo, Inca, Iroquois, Lakota Sioux Maya, Miskuta, Navajo, Nez Perce, Omak, Panan, Piscataway, Seminole, Tiano, and other indigenous peoples and nations in the Western Hemisphere for their valiant and heroic fight against settler colonialism in defense of their cultural integrity, their dignity as peoples, and the theft of their blood-drenched land. History has recorded that Africa's trade, cultural exchange, and political relationship with the indigenous peoples and nations of the Western Hemisphere predates Columbus. Africa's first contact with the indigenous peoples and nations of the Western Hemisphere did not come through Europe, but directly from Africa. But with settler colonial oppression and exploitation, the nature of African and indigenous peoples' relationship qualitatively changed. Resistance, rebellion, and revolution brought a new character to this relationship. Mutual respect and solidarity in the struggle for liberty and dignity became and is its foundation. The AAPRP-GC continues, inherits, and advances this tradition laid before us by our progressive and revolutionary ancestors and the relations established with our indigenous sisters and brothers forged in the crucible of anti-colonial and anti-racist struggles. It was into the arms of our indigenous sisters and brothers that Africans were embraced when fleeing the dehumanizing plantations of slavery. It was in rebellious solidarity that Africans throughout the Western Hemisphere joined in arms with their indigenous brothers and sisters to fight a common enemy. It was the blessing of our indigenous sisters and brothers that Africans established liberated territories like those of the Maroons. We know this history well, and therefore the AAPRP-GC, our love, solidarity, and support for the struggle of our indigenous sisters and brothers is both unquestioned and unbreakable. The AAPRP-GC is forever grateful to our indigenous peoples and nations for their hosting and allowing Africans to sojourn in their homeland. We know that the only homeland that can truly be claimed by an African, no matter where in the world we live, is Africa. Africans' gratitude can only be expressed through our conscious and active solidarity in our common struggle against U.S.-led capitalism and imperialism. We are asking all Africans to join the AAPRP-GC so that you can help us increase our capacity to contribute to the fight to emancipate the indigenous peoples and nations of the Western Hemisphere, but also to all peoples and nations who are victims of settler colonialism. Victory to the revolutionary struggle for Pan-Africanism. Ready for revolution. The victory is for us. The All African People's Revolutionary Party, GC. We thank you.